So that's right. You saw what you just saw down in my basement. I'm a model railroader. So you've already seen part of the railroad if you've gone to the channel by searching for it by name in your search bar. And the locomotive you saw was this one right here. So before we go back to the basement, because I always get this question at least twice a year, I'm going to tell you just how I got into this mess of being a model railroader. And it's the fault of this guy right here. You see, my grandfather on my mother's side was born in 1900 somewhere in eastern Nebraska. And he was born into a poor farm family, and so that meant part-time he was a cowboy and part-time he was behind a horse or a mule pushing a plow. In 1917, my grandfather asked his father's permission to join the Army Expeditionary Force and go fight in what was called the Great War. We now think of that as the First World War. Well, it turns out for an uneducated dirt farmer, my great-grandfather was a pretty smart guy. And he engaged in a period of family counseling with my grandfather. That means he beat the daylights out of my 17-year-old grandfather. And probably told him to get his ass back behind the plow because the horse wasn't going to take itself around the field. Sometime either right before this happened or right after, my grandfather realized that the girl he was interested in was kind of high maintenance, and she frankly wasn't going to be courted by, much less marry some guy who was covered with mud and cow shit. And that meant he had to get a job off the farm. So if you studied history at all, you'll know that the modern road system here in the US is not something that was in existence back then. As a matter of fact, the highway system didn't exist. That was something that took place during the Eisenhower presidency. And once you got outside as big city, roads turned very quickly to gravel, and then from gravel to just a dirt path. And during the spring and the fall, they were impassable because they were mud. And during the winter, they were impassable because they were full of snow. And so the only way to move freight around the country was on the railroad. Well, one of the things that falls into the category of freight at the time was the mail. The U.S. mail moved letters and other packages around the country using two different types of rail cars. One was called a storage mail car, and it kind of looked like a baggage car. The post office in a major city would sort bags of mail, destined for another major city, and just put them in the storage mail car and off they'd go. But there was also what was called the railway post office, and that's where my grandfather spent his entire postal career. He started as a clerk in 1920 or 21 and retired sometime around 1960 with the last of the steam locomotives as an inspector. My grandfather wasn't much of a storyteller. Usually all you could get out of him was, yeah, or something along those lines. But I talked to my father and he remembers this story too, so I know I'm not making it up. I did get a bedtime story as a preschooler about my grandfather working a mail car on a train on a branch line, and the train was held up by cowboys on horses. And that kind of thing puts a bit of a dent in a little kid's mind, and here I am, 50-some years later, with a basement full of model trains, or getting that way. So that's how I became a model railroader. And of all the hobbies you could have, well, it's one of them. Anyway, one of the things we'll do is we'll get down to the basement, we'll take a look at what's been built, we'll take a look at what's going to be built, the next project, and my intent for the railroad.